Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Aparuta desang amatassa tawara ye sodavanta Pamunjantu satang. So today is the half moon day, observance day. There's 10 days left till the end of this month. This winter retreat, I have heard, ends on the 31st of March. So these are perceptions in the present moment, the end of the retreat. And ask yourself right now, what is the end of the retreat as a reality in the present moment? And you realize it's a perception. You imagine it. So you're seeing things as they really are, rather than believing that you've got to get ready for the end of the retreat. After the retreat, you planning to go here or do this, or you start thinking of your duties, responsibilities in the monastery and life and COVID-19 vaccine shots and all possibilities in the future. But all possibilities in the future are right now, at this very moment. Images in the mind, they're perceptions. So you keep reflecting like this rather than living your life for the future. You know, most people who don't reflect on the way things are, planning always for the future, remembering the past, the present moment is just something you acknowledge. What time is it exactly right now at this moment? You look at a clock. So your whole conditioned sense of a separate self is time-bound. The sense of yourself as a separate person is an imagination. It's not a real person. So that's why I keep saying, reminding you, what you believe and think you are, that's what you're not. Because there's only the present moment, here and now. Reality is here and now. Dhamma is here and now. And you imagine waking to reality in the future. That's an image that you create now. So that's why I encourage you to observe this, really seeing things as they are, rather than what you're told to believe in or what your actual tendencies are to believe, your mind, your views and opinions, your conceptions. So, it's really interesting that when I've mentioned many times when we chant the Santidiko Dhamma Kalika Ei Pachiko Opanayako Bhajatang Vaitidapo, how mechanical that can be, chanting in Pali, translating it into English, and yet how profound that is, a statement of reality. So what is Dhamma right now in terms of what you believe Dhamma is? You have, most of us were not born into Buddhist families. So it's a foreign term coming into our consciousness. But the same thing applies to Thais or Sri Lankans or those born into Buddhist families, Buddhist countries. What does it do right now when you try to define Dhamma, apparent, translated as apparent here and now, santitiko? So Dhamma is here and now. It's not something you're going to get in the future. What is it here and now that is a fact, not a memory, not an opinion, not an object of consciousness? It's consciousness itself. And then that's a fact. You know you're conscious, but you believe that consciousness is inside your brain or inside your body. So we separate. We think Ajahn Sumedho's consciousness is confined to his body, Ajahn Sundra's consciousness confined to her body, Ajahn Chandasiri's consciousness is not the same as mine. This is all imagination, isn't it? You imagine, you create Luang Por Sumedho, Ajahn Sundra, Ajahn Chandasiri, with memories, with views, opinions, thoughts. But what is unitive here and now is consciousness, because it's one perfect whole. It's not somebody's personal. It doesn't have any personal qualities. It doesn't separate things. Where what does separate things right now, in terms of the sense of an ego or cultural conditioning, is the memories, the thoughts, the conditions, the feelings, because we're all maybe feeling differently at this time. What emotionally each individual is feeling seems very personal, because it's not going to be the same going from one person to another. But what is the same? What is unitive, what is perfect, is consciousness. And everybody is conscious. And it's not personal. So when you reflect in this way, you begin to change your assumptions, like the worldly assumptions, the materialist conditioning that we have, very much so in modern life, in modern societies, is based on the importance of a separate self. How important, how self-important one is, or maybe you don't feel important because you see yourself in very negative terms. But looking at various programs on YouTube, there's so much available to emphasize to develop the self, to have a better sense of self and self-respect, and so it's an obsession. This period of time, this time in the history of humanity, the self, the separate self, is what everybody believes in. Self-importance. What I think, my rights, my views, my opinions. So like human rights and individual rights, and I mean, these are certainly ideals, not to be despised. But is that going to be liberating when when human rights becomes everybody's a complete self-satisfied individual separate self. Is that the answer to suffering? Or is that just magnifying suffering? Because the conditioned realm is not perfect. So you can't create perfection with conditions, with earth, fire, water, and air, the four elements. They are form elements, time elements. And when you reflect on it, you see it's impossible. I'm not just being negative or trying to say there's something wrong with the four elements, because they can be right or wrong, or good or bad, high or low. They all have qualities. Like the mood you're in right now, the state of mind, each individual person in this temple is experiencing right now has a quality to it. It's a condition. And you're aware of its condition. You know what you're feeling right now. It's like this. If I ask each one of you to describe it, then you're going to get caught up into trying to find the right English equivalents for your feeling. And that's more imagination. You're just trying to think and describe exactly the mood, the state of mind you're in at this moment. You find words like peaceful, or my mind wanders, or I'm confused, or I have doubts, or I'm happy, or I'm unhappy. These words are very limited to describe feeling, aren't they? Feeling isn't intellectual. It's not from the thoughts, from the words, from concepts. It's a condition, the mind, that changes. States of mind that arise and cease according to other conditions. So you might feel one way while you're sitting here, and you go out the door and you feel another way, and somebody says hello and you feel something else, and then somebody snubs you and you feel upset, or somebody makes demands that you don't like to hear, you feel like this. Somebody praises you, you feel this way. Your mood, your feelings will change. You can't help how you feel. You can't decide you're just going to be happy forever, and that can actually happen. So it's learning to trust this ability. When I say trust your ability to reflect, to know, because this moment is like this. Nobody's going to argue that point with me. Everybody here, these are words, but they're not descriptions, personal descriptions of the way it is. So it's like inviting you to open up and just observe, be the witness, the Puto, observing the Dhamma. And whatever you're feeling in this moment is the way it is. Did you choose it, deliberately create a mood that you're experiencing now, or does it just happen because of the conditions? The conditions are like this, inside of the temple, listening to Dhamma reflections like this. Whether you understand what I'm saying is like this, or you don't understand, it's just confusing, it's like this. I'm not asking you to believe or understand what I'm saying, but it's like an encouragement to trust your awareness. So that's encouraging you. It's not a demand. I can't demand it. It's up to you whether you trust awareness. But you've got to know what it is, because mindfulness teachings are very available, and all kinds of teachers talk about mindfulness, and we think of it in a certain way, like concentration. So like, I remember before I ordained, I was living at a temple in Bangkok, and one of the monks there, an English monk, was always telling me to be mindful. So he says, be mindful, mindfulness, always pushing this word mindfulness. So he took me to a residence hall in the monastery where it was on the second floor. And on the way up, he tripped on the steps. And I felt certain kind of glee. I couldn't help but think mindfulness, because we think that tripping on the steps is a lack of mindfulness. If you think you have got to be mindful on that level of just concentrating on what your body is doing, but mindfulness doesn't mean you don't trip on the step. It means you're aware that tripping on a step is like this. So developing this kind of, it's a constant ability to do it, no matter what you're doing, whether you're working in the kitchen or in your privacy of your room or you're gardening or whatever. The thing with, on a silent retreat, that's one of the advantages of the Amaravati Winter's Retreat, is that, we're not socializing. Because so much of escape from the present moment is to socialize, to talk. And that's habitual. Because talking, is what we like to do. When we don't have anybody to talk to, things come up in consciousness, negative memories, loneliness. One becomes obsessed with various thoughts that arise. And then we have this idea you've got to get rid of them to get samadhi, get concentration. You've got to get rid of the wandering mind, that you're somebody who can't meditate because your mind wanders. You don't know how many times I've heard that over the years. People saying, I can't meditate, my mind won't stay still. I sit down and my mind just goes crazy. What is that? Those are all words and views about yourself. This sense of this wandering mind, these wandering memories, is very personal. And we believe it. We think meditation is going into silence, samadhi, peace, tranquility, bliss, all these words. But the present moment, here and now, and that's all there ever is, and ever will be, is here and now. That's where what we experience, what we're experiencing now is consciousness. It's not something you'll find. It's what you are. If you're trying to find yourself, find who you are, where do you belong, where do you fit in, you might find temporary satisfaction in various things or conditions, but they change. But you can know that you believe you've got to find yourself is a whole way of thinking. Because doubt, where do I fit in? Where do I belong? It creates doubt. It creates emptiness. Because when you doubt, when you start doubting, that means, with doubt, if you use it like in Zen traditions and so forth, they deliberately use doubt. The Diamond Sutra is all about doubting. The Heart Sutra. Have you ever read the Heart Sutra in Mahayana Buddhism? It absolutely makes no sense on the logical, intellectual, reasonable level. In the Nibbana Sutta, the first stanza of the Nibbana Sutta is just the same as the Heart Sutra in Mahayana. And when you first read it, it makes you doubt. You don't know what it means, because your whole thinking process is based on logic and reason, on a separate self, reasoning, being logical, being sensible, making sense, on the intellectual of giving the right names, the right definitions. And if you don't know the right names for things, you go to scriptures or teachers or somebody else to find out. But what you really are, we're all the same. We're consciousness. These forms are in consciousness. These bodies sitting here in this temple, they're in a temple, and the temple is in consciousness. So consciousness is not confined to your brain or your heart or to the physical form of people's bodies. It doesn't have any form. It's formless. You can't find it as an object. But you can know you're conscious, and that's a fact that you can't deny at this moment. Now that awakening to that reality, to reality itself, when you think about it, when you think about Dhamma and Buddhist teachings and you read different philosophers, different religious traditions and so forth, it's all words, whatever religion, whatever philosophy it might be. Words can't take you, can't convey the reality of here and now. Because they're sankharas, they're conditions. They're limited. So do you need to define Dhamma? Have it, what does Luang Por Sumedho say Dhamma is? And you go and believe that? Or you ask somebody else and they say something different. Are you going to believe them or doubt them? But whatever I say, has an effect here and now. And the unitive perfection of this moment isn't in what you believe or doubt or understand, but in conscious awareness. Now, I've talked many times about practice of deliberate, intentional thinking. And I'm sure you understand what I'm saying. But it's still directions, words given to you by me, separate forms. And it's not something that is not understandable. You can certainly intentionally think anything you want at this moment. But to realize the space between the words, now that we're not used to recognizing. Language is structured, with grammar. So we have grammatical patterns, and one word leads to another. There's a verb, there's a noun, a personal pronoun, a verb, another noun, or a pronoun, or a adverb, adjective. To say, I am happy. But then, before you even start thinking I, and intentional thinking, you're not really interested in the meaning of the words. You know the meaning already. So the meaning is not our, you're not paying attention to the meaning of the words. It's more or less a sense that you deliberately think to examine the emptiness, conscious awareness before the actual pronoun I, the space between I and am, the space between am and happy, and the ending of happy. You begin, if you keep examining that space, that emptiness, so you're, it's not trying to believe in this, it's a very simple, practical method to recognize the reality of conscious awareness without words, without thoughts interfering, without being attached to the words or the feelings or the meaning of the words that you're thinking, but noticing the gaps between, the space between the words. And so silence, when they talk about silence, you're awakening to silent consciousness that isn't thinking, is like this. And you can think anything. You know, the most conceited thought, I'm the best person in the whole world, or I'm absolutely hopeless case. It can be self-disparaging or self-aggrandizing. Doesn't matter what the words are about the pronouns you use, whether it's about yourself or somebody else. So we carry memories, and, you know, like asking, for those of us whose parents have passed away years ago, I was thinking, I like to ask, where is my mother now? She died in 1989. And that's words, isn't it? Thinking about my mother brings up a certain feeling. But the space between my and mother, where is my mother now, is what you interested in. So that can bring up emotions, strong feelings and memories. But I am happy or I'm not happy, it doesn't matter what kind of words you choose, as long as, because you're not interested in the words or the feelings they arouse. So at first, my advice is to choose words that don't arouse emotions. Later on, as you have more confidence in the space, in the silence, underlying your thoughts, underlying your moods, underlying everything. These bodies are in consciousness. The space in this temple is in consciousness. The space outside the temple is in consciousness. Space has no quality other than spaciousness. But these forms can't exist without space. Try to imagine no space and imagine yourself in a no space situation. You can't do it. So space, earth, fire, water, and air are in consciousness. So pointing this out, just logically speaking, it makes sense. Where in the materialist world, consciousness came out of material. Or it was created by God. And consciousness is inside the each individual human form. And then there have been arguments whether dogs and cats are conscious. But dogs and cats are in space. Space is in consciousness. You can't get beyond consciousness. You can create things into this present moment, your thoughts, your feelings, your views and opinions. And that's what we do. That's what materialism is, what the world is all about. It's a creation that we create with thoughts, with memories, with conditioning. So in this encouraging scene, the space, earth, fire, water elements, they're the time elements. Your body is a time element. That's why it ages. You can't sustain youth. They're native. The bodies are meant to be born, grow up, get old, and die. And then we identify with that, with a condition that is imperfect. And then how can we not feel threatened by death or doubt or what we appear, whether we're attractive or not, or white or black or male or female? These are all conditions that are unsatisfying. So that's why we suffer, because we are attached to things that can't really satisfy us. We can't be content with the material world, no matter how pleasant and comfortable it might be for us. So it's kind of a relief to see your pursuits to find happiness and comfort and success, respect, and all the best you can think of, and through the forms of earth, fire, water, air, and space, with all good intentions, will end up failing you, because you're grasping imperfection when your true nature is already perfect. So it's awakening to this perfection of conscious awareness here and now, and learning to trust it. It's silent. Doesn't say anything. It has no words. Words come through conditioning. Words are about sankharas, conditions, about phenomena. So condition, the valid use of conditioning is to investigate the limitation of conditioning. All sape sankhara anicca, all conditions are impermanent. So these two sentences that I've repeated over the years, sape sankhara anicca, all conditions are impermanent. That's a profound statement. When not just to believe it because Buddha said so, but the Buddha didn't intend us to just believe. He gave this practice of investigating, finding out, are there any permanent conditions? We say, no, there are no permanent conditions because the Buddha said they're all impermanent. So I believe that. That's not investigating, that's believing. But why would the Buddha make such a statement so important? So in the Anattalakkana Sutta that we chant sometimes, it's all about impermanence. Everything is impermanent. But we chant that, and we believe it, or we use that scripture in order to remind ourselves that even the most subtle condition is impermanent. So a condition is something that arises and ceases, begins and ends. In Pali, Buddhism, of course, it's called sankharas. You can use the word phenomena, phenomenon, condition, the born, the created, the formed, the conditioned. So what is the space between the conditions is the unborn, uncreated, unformed. You don't create silence or stillness or the space between words. You create the words. You think the words, but the space between the words, the gap. Mind the gap, as the London Underground reminds us. Now this is just sharing how I've learned, how I become so confident in this practice, because I really investigated it. I was so obsessed with thoughts. I'd read so many books on Buddhism, suttas, corresponded with the Pali Society and Kandy, the World Fellowship of Buddhists in Bangkok. And when I finished my contract with the Peace Corps in Malaysia, I went to Thailand to practice, to find a teacher. Because even though I was inspired by the teachings, I still suffered all the time. Not because of any real external problems in the situation I was in, but because of the way I thought. Full of doubt, fear, a lot of fear. But when you awaken to Dhamma, then you realize there's nothing to fear. On the level of sankharas, there's always a lot to fear. So that's why when we identify with sankharas, with the body, with the thoughts, the emotional habits we have, it's habitual. It's a kind of conditioned into us to think, to believe. Because the society, the parents that brought us up believed in it, and that we're, our reality is the forms, the bodies that we have. The society believes that. So science believes that to this day. Are you going to believe science or what the society tells you is right and wrong or true or false? Or can you trust your awareness to investigate? And this is the encouragement, not telling you whether you're right or wrong, good or bad, because I found out years ago by giving people advice about whether they're good meditators or not, or, wasn't helpful. By mentioning everybody's faults, by telling you what's wrong with you, was a matter of opinion. It didn't seem to help, because the problem is lack of trust in awareness and consciousness. Now this teaching is pretty old, 2,564 years old. But it's natural teaching. It's not like a discovery by somebody called the Buddha 2,564 years ago. This is memory, thoughts, views, opinions. But it's reality itself. It's awakened to reality, to Dhamma. And then you have you see it is stable, trustworthy. No matter what you're going through on an emotional, physical level at any moment. Now, when you at first listening to silence, you're not accustomed to it, emotionally, personally, culturally, you're not conditioned for that. So it doesn't seem like anything, so you tend to ignore it. I remember years ago giving a retreat here at Amaravati, and a woman I knew was fascinated by sound of silence, so she kept looking for a sound. She came on a 10-day retreat determined to find the sound of silence. So I'd watch her on this retreat, and she was desperately trying to find something. Desperately trying to listen to some kind of imagined sound of silence. Then at the end of the retreat, she gave up trying, and she began to notice silence. So trying to just notice the tendencies we have to try to get something. We've got to get samadhi. We've got to get concentration. In Thailand, for example, they emphasize so much concentration. But at Wat Pah Pong, when I first went there, Luang Por Sumedho was aware that, was the first Western disciple in a very remote monastery in northeast Thailand. And he didn't know any Westerners or foreigners before I came. But he was aware that just trying to get samadhi in the situation I was in was futile, because I just tried to suppress everything. And I find all attempts at trying to get samadhi, I become a control freak. I get upset with people for making a noise, with birds chirping, with dogs barking. Remember at Nana Chat, when we first established Wat Pa Nana Chat in Thailand, the radios were becoming popular in the village of Bung Hwai, Ban Bung Hwai, run by batteries. And the fields surrounding Wat Pa Nana Chat, the rice fields, the farmers would have these radios hanging on the horns of their water buffaloes plowing the fields playing popular songs, Thai songs. And it made me angry. Because I didn't want to hear Thai pop music while I was meditating. And just by reflecting on that, I don't want this. I don't like this. The farmers should respect my meditation practice. Is all about me getting something I don't have, me trying to control life around me so I can get some peace. About me and my practice. My practice is so important. I want everybody to shut up so I can practice. I want the world to stop annoying me so I can get my samadhi. So why not start out with wisdom, which is learning to trust awareness. So, the Four Noble Truths, to me, that's the heart of it all, because it's not about belief. Buddha is not asking us to believe that suffering is a noble truth, but to reflect on suffering, to awaken to suffering. Why do we suffer? What are the causes? What is the end of suffering? This is investigating, finding out for yourself, not just believing in the Four Noble Truths, but using them for directions, because we get lost in our own doubts, self-doubts, fears. But you're aware, you know when you're caught up in fear or anxiety or worry or self-criticism. When you're angry, when you're greedy. There's always this knowing of things. It's like this. Then you think a good monk, a good nun shouldn't be greedy. The ideal of a samana, of an alms mendicant is, that's a direction, not a position you can take personally. So it's not to develop a sense of you as a person, to increase that sense of me and mine. So in the Vinaya is all about conditioning. All the rules are sankharas, about action and speech. So that is conforming to in form, joining the Sangha as a samana, as a monastic. It's conforming to this traditional form. Not for personal reasons, not for, to become something like a monk or a nun, an anagarika, or, trying to become something, but to use the form for awareness. Because the form allows us to live in a certain way that is, has merit. Right action, right speech, right livelihood. But not to take it personally. To see whether, I'm, my speech is perfect or my actions are absolutely flawless, to try to, overstate the identity with the rules, but to use the rules to observe thoughts, emotions, mental states that arise in regards to restraint, physical restraint, emotional, not speaking on emotional feelings. So anger arises. You're aware there's anger, but you refrain from speaking. That can be seen as repression, or is it wisdom? Just to blurt out everything that goes through your mind. All your thoughts and feelings of the moment. That just creates disharmony. If we were all just expressing our personal feelings towards each other all the time, we couldn't live together. It'd be too much, overwhelming. But the form itself isn't meant to be attached to as an identity, but a skillful means. Because for happiness in the world, too, it's to do good, refrain from doing bad. That's logic. Kusala Dhamma, Kusala Dhamma. To do good, receive good. To do bad, receive bad result. Law of karma. Because conditions, phenomena, sankharas are all karma. The law of karma is about birth and death, beginning and ending. What is born dies. That's all karmic. When we use this word karma. So condition, when you identify with conditions, you're identifying with karma. And they're all, karma is not going to be always what you imagine, what you want. Who wants to get sick? Who wants to get old and die? So if we identify with the body, with the karmic form, such as your physical form, that's suffering. Because that's not what you are. So find out what you really are, and it's impersonal, anatta, non-self. And on the intellectual level, that you can't imagine non-self, like you're nobody. If you're not the body, you're not the person, the personality, you're not your thoughts, you're not your memories, you're not your social position. It's like being nobody. But then as you tune into being nobody, silence, the space, the gaps between words, thoughts, emotionally you can feel disappointed because it doesn't seem like anything, like you want to become enlightened, and that sounds like something really wonderful, to become enlightened and you're absolutely free and perfect as an individual, happy forever, blessing the world with loving kindness is all very, created thoughts, or good thoughts. But if that's what you're expecting, you're going to be disappointed. So recognize that here and now is not something to expect, but to awaken to realize something. You don't have to find it, because you are consciously aware at this moment. Every one of you is. I remember years ago, before I ordained, hearing somebody quoted as saying that there's the path, but there's nobody on the path. And I thought, that's depressing. There's a path, but nobody's on it. Because I still thinking about it. Are there, like Ajahn Chah, isn't he on the path? Or I believe Luang Por Sumedho was on the path. He finished the path. I believe Luang Por Sumedho was an arahant. But when you realize you're not a body, no body, the body is non-self, you're not a person, Sakya Ditti Silabhata Paramasa, the first two fetters, personality view, cultural, social conditioning, Vicikicca, the third one, which means doubt, which is always a result of thinking, holding on to thoughts, to opinions and views. So these are the three fetters or obstructions, bondages that are very much created, artificial creations that we're conditioned with when we're born. And we can be aware of them as objects in conscious awareness. You can observe the ego, the sense of your separate self. So when we use the word ego, it means like Sakya Ditti, this I am this body, this person, this physical form. And we talk about egotistical, means quite selfish, self-centered, or overestimating oneself. It's still words and thoughts, perceptions. But in terms of Sakya Ditti, it's much more broad meaning the identity, the conditioned identity we have about who we are as a physical form. Silabhata Paramasa. It's conventions. Believing in conventions, being a slave to conventions. Being limited always by the conventional forms. Believing that conventions are right and wrong, and getting caught up in the cultural conditioning, social conditioning, religious conditioning. And then Vicikicca, doubt, from grasping thoughts, opinions, and views. Always take you to never being quite sure, doubting. So intuitive awareness, or mindfulness, isn't intellectual. It's aware of the intellect. It's not judging it, saying, we've got to get rid of our intellect or social, cultural, religious conditioning. It's not about getting rid of anything, but understanding that attachment is bondage to conditions that are inevitably unsatisfied. So in this retreat, we've got 10 more days of perfect silence, perfect conditions for samadhi, getting to nibbana, or however you might think, or, you've got to make the most of it. Just observe what you think, how you react to the views about the end of winter's retreat, what you've got to do, what you want to do. It's like this. I'm not saying you should stop thinking about it, but trust yourself to be aware it is thoughts arising and ceasing in the present. And liberation is here and now, not in the future. So I offer this as a reflection.